Greetings and salutations, and stitches. I'm Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful video. This time, I'm going to tackle the Spelljammer box slipcase. It's not really a box set; it's a slipcase. There is 3 books in this slipcase. All of them are 64 pages. You'll frequently hear me whenever I do a book review or an overview that I will tell you how many pages the book has, and oftentimes remark that many books that range from anywhere from $9 to $50 have more pages than any single one of these books in this slipcase. But let's go ahead. Overall, the slipcase is actually fairly nice. It's really simple artwork on the front. There's 3 little window panes in each one, reminiscent of the crystal spheres referenced in older Spelljammer adventures, which, sadly, they kind of degraded the whole concept. Let's just be frank about that. Wizards of the Coast really simplified a whole Spelljammer system down to such an exceedingly extreme degree that it's actually the 5th edition Spelljammer version is a skeleton, a very, very basic skeleton of what was in 2nd edition. And even what was touched upon in 3rd edition and so forth. In the case of space fantasy adventure, you happen to have 3 books plus a screen. I will first note out that if Spelljammer is exceedingly lacking in your tastes and you have checked it out, I would highly suggest Starfinder. That is an entire space game built upon the basic framework of the D&D 3.5 system with a bunch of updates and modifications added to it. And then there's also another great TTRPG called Traveler. That is also a great choice for space adventures. However, it is less fantasy and more soft sci-fi. And then you also have games like, if you want to go really old school, you can go past you can avoid other than Traveler, because you got Classic Traveler and you got Modern Traveler, which is the Mongoose Traveler. You also have Star Frontiers, which is another game from TSR, original TSR. I have yet to cover that on this channel. And even Doctor Who. There's also a TTRPG for Doctor Who that has some space elements to it. But it's mostly focused around time travel and solving problems. But anyways, as I said before, there is a total of 3 books. I do like very much the cover art, even though the cover art in itself is not very action-oriented. I got a part of me feels that Spelljammer was rushed to production, literally to counteract another space fantasy game that was based on an older space fantasy game, soft sci-fi, that was rumored to come out roughly around the time the Spelljammer came out. However, did not materialize for various reasons. At some point, I will cover that situation in itself, but that is a rather interesting story. If you want to really stab at it, go for it. As I said, the Astral Adventure Guide has very basic artwork. And you got Boo's Astral Menagerie. I do love the use of the word menagerie. It doesn't get used enough. It's a beautiful word. And the cover art is actually probably the strongest of the 3, because you got Minsk, Boo, and an astral dragon flying through space with a whole lot of action happening behind them. Yes. And then you have the Light of Xaryxis, which is interesting in itself. A nice cover overall, but And then you have the Game Master screen, which is always nice to have a Game Master screen. There's a few times when I've gotten after publishers like Outland Arts for not having an actual Game Master screen, but just having slip-ins on their website. But this Game Master screen is actually fairly well set up overall. It covers a broad range of stuff. You have your... you have over here on your right, you got your setting a DC guide, skills and associated abilities, suffocation rules, because if you fall outside of the air and gravity bubble that naturally occurs around a spelljammer, because in old lore of Spelljammer, all objects have a stronger form of gravity that also happens to generate a protective field about itself that holds air around it more efficiently than actual gravity. Actual gravity is actually one of the weakest forces in the entire universe. However, I got a personal theory that gravity is actually not a force. My personal theory, based on my little studies, is not an actual force. It's actually a manifestation of magnetism. Take that for your moment of thought. But there's also weightlessness movement rules here. Simple, quick section here. And then on to the other panel, there is the Astral Encounter table. For, just when your players are just going through space, going from point A to point B, you can always just randomly roll up in an event. And there seems to be a very good variety overall on this screen for random encounters, Wildspace encounters, Astral Sea encounters, and ship encounters. There happens to be 3 tables. 1, 2, 3. In the order of I reading them. Then there is ship to ship starting distance. So when you engage with another ship in combat in space, there is a starting distance rules that tie into how effective certain types of weapons are being used at different distances. And then there's crashing rules, shipboard task table, ship quirks. If you have a really old ship, you might have a quirk, a ship cargo rule set, both cheap and expensive. Generally, there are rules in Spelljammer for ship combat, but for the most part, ship combat rules are like little sections like this. Really basic, like if you have a large object that crashes into your ship, it does 4d10 damage. Huge, it does 8d10. If it's gargantuan, it does 16d10. That actually is based off the general base math that's used in the game, the Dungeon Master's Guide for Dungeons and Dragons, based on scaling of monsters. But it's adjusted for various other things. Now let's go into this. Oh, by the way, the artwork on the screen is actually fairly nice overall. It's a lot of purple, teal, and blue ranges. Teal is sort of that green-blue tone. You got a lot of purple to blue, and blue. And then with a touch of pink. Interestingly enough, important rule, purple is technically a color that does not exist in nature or in the world. Purple is actually a biological quirk of the human eye, confusing a combination of red and blue that exist simultaneously right next to each other in very close proximity. That your brain essentially assembles a new color out of red and blue when they're near each other. So Yeah, I took a lot of art classes, and I also studied psychology and biology and philosophy. It's just, yeah, you get a lot of weird stuff of when you find out that certain colors people think exist actually technically don't exist. It's just a reconstruction of your mind. And so whenever you see purple, there's a reason why that's the most common color for evil. It's actually unnatural. I'm going to go backwards to the beginning because I just touched on the Game Master Guide. Astral Adventurer's Guide. I do like the fact that they went with alliteration for it. But they probably could have come up with a different word instead of guide to keep it going with A. Oh yeah, in the back of the Astral Adventurer's Guide there is a map. I'm going to have to pull that out, put that down, because that's going to get in the way. By the way, this is the launch version of the Spelljammer Adventures box slipcase. So it does have all the infamous errors that were put in because Wizards of the Coast has issues with its management. Management and staffing. To be quite frank, they probably need to reconsider a bunch of shit. There is a first adventure table here for setting up getting your characters going, and then there's a basic terminology section as well as a using book, and a little bit of information about astral campaigns. You happen to have a nice little selection, a very beautiful piece of artwork of a rather diverse group of adventurers, and yet simultaneously they excluded the plasmoid from that image. Why did they exclude the plasmoid? Is Wizards of the Coast hinting at something? That amorphous entities that can take on many forms are not allowed amongst the rest? And they have to be this weird recluse, like the plasmoid here is a monk. I have to make sure to change the angle because my light is reflecting funny on it. But you got Divine Contract section right here. This is backgrounds for your Astral Drifter, which is actually kind of neat. And then you have another one over here, Wildspacer. So you got two backgrounds. And then you got races. You happen to have here a basic setup explanation information on the concept of race and how each little thing is determined, like lifespan, height, weight, etc., etc. And in the weird, sad kind of way, of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, is that they explain to you a set of things in a super generalized version without any form of constraints or flavor or style. So in other words, in the case of lifespan descriptions for most of the races, oh yeah, they also left out the astronome on that panel too. There's no astronome. So they left him out too. But anyways, in the case of lifespan information, they kind of like leave it up to your game master to decide. First and foremost, you happen to have the Astral Elf because it starts by alphabetical order. The Astral Elf happens to be both black and white. I don't know what the significance of why by evolution of Astral Elf evolution they would both have dark skin and light skin variations. Usually, skin tone is usually something derived from exposure to excessive sunlight. Tends to be creatures that live more northern hemispheres or further away from the prime line from the sun. Would have lighter toned skins, and creatures closer to the narrower the core, more directly on the sun, would be darker skinned because skin color protects against sunlight. Which also is me applying science to a fantasy game. And by all ways and means, you don't really need to apply science to it. But then again, if there's no extra if it's a fantasy game and there's no actual mechanism to colors, then colors no longer matter. So in a way, they should either be all the same color or they'd be just splotches of color based on what other mechanisms that are supposed to be indicated or projected. Like mating colors or something, like birds. But anyways, you got the Astral Elf, the Auto Gnome. I play a lot of gnomes, but I have never played an Auto Gnome. You got GIF or GIF. You got the Hadrazi. By the way, the infamous origin story of the Hadrazi is actually a modern invention by Wizards of the Coast. As far as I know, from many sources that have actually shown and cited older Spelljammer editions and older text in other books prior to Wizards of the Coast, the controversial origin of the Hadrazi was actually not a part of their origin. They actually were just a generally very happy race that existed in the Spelljammer universe that didn't really have a hard history as to where their origin was, but they were always happy and adventurous group that always loved learning new things and experiencing life. And their life mission was basically learning and growing as people, which is actually slightly different from the origin story of their original precursors, because interestingly enough, Star Frontiers actually is the base of all the ancestries in Spelljammer, or many of the ancestries in Spelljammer are based out of ancestries in Star Frontiers. And as you can see here, here's the Yanzi. Yanzi actually, interestingly enough, was a more warrior-oriented culture in Star Frontiers, and they always had basically life enemies. And the concept of a life enemy could be someone that wronged you and you had to overcome them, or a enemy tribe in ancient times. But the concept of life enemy in Star Frontiers has evolved for the Yuanzi to be like a life mission. Like a doctor Yuanzi would want to make a life enemy of a disease. And they're the more powerful or the more severe the life enemy is, the greater the mission in defeating that life enemy is. So you can have a doctor declare a disease as a life enemy, and they can go out and dedicate their life to defeating that disease or injustice in the world. So Star Frontiers, which is the precursor to, which is the more sci-fi original game system in which Spelljammer is a conversion from into D&D, had basically a life story of a culture growth between a more warlike species, a more hostile species, evolving as they went from living on a planet to living in space, becoming open to all the life forms in space, and evolving their life missions or their concepts to be more in line with the diversity of the life forms of the universe. So you have a bit of darkness transformed into something that a player can utilize as a negative or a positive force for your character in Star Frontiers, where you have like questionable choices with the design and with the Hadrazi with Wizards of the Coast. The Hadrazi has some ridiculous movement shenanigans in here. You happen to have some plasmoids here, and you happen to have one riding a giant space hamster. Giant space hamsters were typically used by gnomes, which is funny enough of considering that the space hamster got really giant, yet the gnomes did not. And whatever mechanism caused that happening is, I forget. And then you have the Xaryxis, which is actually also based off another ancestry that was also in... See, you got the Plasmoid and the Xaryxis, which actually descended from two other ancestries in Star Frontiers. Get that book out again. You do not see them here, but you can see them here. This is the two species in which the Xaryxis and the Plasmoid actually originated from. And put the Star Frontiers back, because I'm not going to cover that today, however much I want to. So there you go. You got some basic rules about how Xaryxis operate, along with their secondary arms and stuff. Usually for Xaryxis, their secondary arms are usually not nearly as functional as their primary arms. They typically have either the lifting capacity in different editions of half their primary arms, so they can only handle like small weapons or stuff like that. As you can see here, there's actually one that has actually lost one of its secondary arms. You got a Beholder, because Beholders are actually a major issue in Spelljammer universe. And then you have the Astral Adventuring section, which covers basically air envelopes, how perception is handled in outer space, movement speed, how your Spelljammer moves in space, the concept of a gravity plane, drifting, falling, and etc. Then you have the Astral Plane section, explaining travel by thought alone. Then you have new spells like Air Bubble, Create Spelljammer Helm, Fish Suit, various chair. The chairs are the Spelljammer helms, and so forth. You have rules in here for how to deal with your situation. This is your ship combat rules in here, in this section right here. First and foremost, it's ship combat. There's a starting distance instructions, right? Information right here. All this basically does right here is basically say, if you are in X distance, you can use these weapons. If you're in X distance, you can use these. If you're in X distance, you cannot use anything of such sort. Anything past 1,000 feet is beyond the range of most ranged weapons, unless you're like a crazy warlock with a splash of sorcerer or a longbow archer that happens to have various other feats and features. Yeah. There. And then there's a little bit of information on how to board a ship, crashing a ship into another ship or object, and ship repairs, how to, the basic weaponry of a ship right here, and a map of a bombarding a ship. So there you go. And then you go into the various ships right here. Oh, yeah, this is the first ship right here. So all the rules for spaceship combat is here. Basically tackling a ship, repairing it, and the ranges of your basic spells and weapons. And then you have the ships themselves with the actual weapons that are mounted on each type of ship. Through here. And this is basically how you end up constructing the combat rules of ship combat. You basically use the initiative system that is referenced up here. Initiative. Right here. And then you basically move and adjust your ship in manner. Decide whether you're going to board, fire your weapons, the characters' weapons at the ship. You're going to board the ship. You're going to crash into the ship. You fly into the ship and hit it. There's the damage if you collide with various objects at various sizes. The repairs. And then if you decide to stay at distance and shoot at your enemy ship, these are the weapon systems your ship has and how many of them you have. And then the basic map of all your ships. So the rest of this book is, for the most part, nothing but ship maps. And yeah, there is actually rules for ship combat in Spelljammer. It's just not a whole lot. And it's just as thin and basic as possible. Which is the basic concept behind Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, is that there isn't a whole lot of information about all the fiddly edge cases and situations if you try to do certain things with certain things. But there is just enough information that you can basically get the basic framework, and your game master or dungeon master basically has to fill out the rest of it. And a lot of players and some a good number of game masters like that. However, there's a general problem that it results in inconsistency in rulings and other things. And Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is in this weird zone where it is a system that has has a lot of rules, but a lot of the rules are more generalized. Older editions of Dungeons & Dragons, like Advanced Dungeons & Dragons or Basic Dungeons & Dragons, is actually quite rules light. And it actually is very promoting of the ability to improvise a lot of mechanics. But it gives you the basic logic of the universe in which you're trying to play to build off those improvised mechanics and keep a coherency in them. Where Pathfinder 2nd edition actually fills out a lot of the variable situations as well as Starfinder. And it's just a matter of you finding the rules or knowing where to look to get the rules. Or if you play Pathfinder or Starfinder long enough, you actually end up eventually understanding the whole structure, the basic logic structure of them. And you don't really have to start hunting for rules anymore. And if you do need to hunt for a rule, it takes no time at all. So there you go. And that's the basics of the adventure guide. There's also, interestingly enough and weirdly enough, in the back of the Astral Adventures guide, there's a section on a starting point or a home base town or village in the Astral Sea. The quirk of this is that the Rock of the Burrow, they actually have the Radiant Citadel, in which they could have used hey, you could use the Radiant Citadel as also an option, and gave you a bunch more information on it or different information. That way, this also couples into the Radiant Citadel. However, the Radiant Citadel is basically just its own thing that also just simultaneously happens or exists in the same world. So you basically have two very bare bones very bare bones basic starting areas. The Radiant Citadel from the Radiant Citadel book, and the Rock of the Burrow. Then we go into Boo's Menagerie, and you get Boo jumping at someone to take their eyes out. Boo's a bit of a psycho, apparently. Although he's very cute. And then you have, this is actually quite nice in the front here. You got a stat block section based on the creatures. You have the CR level of all the creatures, and then you got the name, and you got the creature type. Now, I'm going to say that this is a good start, but Wizards of the Coast yet again screwed up. They failed to put a page number next to all these. By not putting a page number next to them, it has resulted in the fact that now you have to look at the letter for the creature Oh, Auto Gnome. It's AU. So it should be closer to the end of the A's section. So now I have to go page through. I have to put this down. And then I know it's in the A section. So if I quickly flip and I get to, oh, I'm in the B section, BC, I've gone past it. So I had to back up and go find it. And look, there's the Auto Gnome. So there you go. There's one problem like right there, is that they failed to include a page number. The page number would at least have gotten you moving along a lot faster. Then you got this next section right here, which is actually rather nice. It actually has a D100 table based on different environments in the Astral Sea and various situations where you can roll and you can end up with a random creature. This is nice. However, this is, by the way, no ways balanced to your campaign or adventure. So unless you truly want your party running up against a CR 15 creature just by rolling on a random table at level 1, and you had to improvise a situation where that thing doesn't go after them immediately and they can choose to get away. Okay, then you happen to have some nice range of creatures. I do have to say that I do like the fact that they have decided to include proficiency bonus in the newer monster books. And it does say right here, it's typically lawful evil. The Artarch Priest. That is used to be, if you look in the beginning of any monster book for most editions of Dungeons and Dragons, you would typically see when a notation in the beginning of the book that says that alignment is just the most common alignment for that type of creature, and is no way a restricting characteristic that forces all the creatures that in existence of that type to be that alignment. It's just a starting point for a quick of ease for game masters. Too many people complain about that crap. They don't read the fine text in the front, so they had to go all the way back here and change it so it says typically lawful evil. And still, people are probably going to complain that it says it's typically lawful evil. You got a section on astral elves. You got your various astral elves. And so forth. You actually have a fairly nice range of critters in this book. I do note that there is this weird thing with D&D Beyond where there are some creatures that were made for this book, but were split off into a special add-on for D&D Beyond. There was a Spelljammer Monsters Compendium. Personally, I do not care for the fact that Wizards of the Coast did that, as that often results in FOMO for players and game masters to just buy everything on D&D Beyond or create accounts for it. And the problem with Wizards of the Coast actually has a history of abandoning platforms between changes in editions or stuff like that. They had a character creation platform for Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, and they also had D Modern, which was a variant of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 that was set for modern era. They had a character creation platform for that, and encounter building rules system for that, and archive of monsters and all kinds of stuff in that. Wizards of the Coast deleted that. They also had a really good Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition character creation system that was up to date with all the various erratas and fixes. And they deleted that. So that is the danger of, if you go on D&D Beyond and put your money into D&D Beyond, you are at the risk of Wizards of the Coast basically getting to one D&D or Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 or Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition, whichever it turns out to be in the future. It's actually looking more like it's 6th edition than 5th edition. There's actually more compatibility between 3.0 and 3.5 than there is apparently between Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and Dungeons & Dragons 1 Dungeons & Dragons, or 1 D&D. So there you go. You got a lunar dragon. A very beautiful scene right there. You got some sketches. You typically have one sketch per monster with some limited exceptions, like in the case of this lunar dragon. You got only one image for the young lunar dragon and the lunar dragon wormling. That looks more like the youngling, the young one. You got a megapede, which doesn't really feel like a megapede. There should actually be a set of legs for each segment in the megapede, if it is a type of typical pede. And then, as you can see, there's Murder Comet and whole other Neogi. The history of the Neogi is they're slavers. Typically, in a lot of Dungeons & Dragons has a deep history of slavery. However, people who complain about the whole slavery thing forget to mention that it's usually universal to evil creatures. Evil creatures are slavers, which creates the opportunity for good players to defeat the slavers and defeat slavery. Removing it from the game is just a terrible idea. There's a solar dragon. Space clowns. Yes. I say someone definitely has seen a juggalo before. You got giant space hamsters and a giant space hamster and a space hamster with a gnome. A space molehawk and a space swine. Pigs fly in Spelljammer. Starlight apparitions and so forth. You actually have a fairly decent collection. Vampirates. So you got vampire pirates. And a Zodar, which happens to be a CR16. And so forth. You got a fairly nice selection of creatures in here. It's only 64 pages of critters. And then you have the Light of Xaryxis, which is an adventure based around your characters are on a world, and then all of a sudden crystals start forming and hitting it. You go on to a space adventure, and you discover that space elves, or the astral elves, a group of astral elves or enemies, have a star that is dying, and they use the energy of the crystals to keep their star alive. From the basic overview feel I've read of this, it's the range of options in this adventure is in line with, say, a Telltale's video game, where you have choices, but none of the choices matter really, and it's all really linear, and it's actually expedited along. It actually flows along and escalates pretty quickly to the conclusion. This is only like 64 pages, so it's actually a very basic framework of an adventure with very few real options. So the term illusion of choice actually strongly applies to this adventure. It's largely up to the game master or dungeon master to actually expand this out and fill in all the gaps in it. There is just a basic framework of an adventure that travels from level 5 to 8. So, there you go. I have not run it yet. I actually had several players that were really interested in Spelljammer, and then they read through some of the books on D&D Beyond. They read through these, and they lost interest. So, there you go. Overall, from what I see and say, yes, indeed. Let's put the books back in here. The original price for this set, I swear, according to this box, it's $70. $70 feels really high. The 3 books in themselves, when you take 3 books that are 64 pages, let's do quick math here. 64 times 3 equals 192. What book has 192 pages? I can tell you, there's actually 2 books that have 192 pages. First and foremost, I will reintroduce you to the delightful Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. First and foremost, Sword Adventurer's Guide actually has fewer pages than 192. It only has 157 pages, which is more than 2 books of the Spelljammer set. And I think there's one other book that has only 192 pages. So each individual book is officially the smallest book in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So you have number 1, a 3-way tie for number 1 for Spelljammer. And then you have Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. And then there's like 2 other books that have 192 and 196 pages and so forth. So the Spelljammer box set basically contains the second biggest book. All 3 together combined is the second biggest book for 5th edition. I do love the selection of ancestries added. There are some nice spells and added features. Air Bubble. Some of the spells are actually kind of crap. The spells in the new spells exist literally just to facilitate Spelljammer. I do like the fact that they added a few spells here and there, and a few magic items. However, as I said, the spells literally function solely to facilitate the game, Spelljammer. You got Air Bubble, which is considered to be the most garbage spell there is in D&D for 2nd level. And then you have Crete Spelljammer. So you have 2 spells right here. And then you have a new magic item, which is the Spelljammer Helm. And that's it. So I like the fact that they added 2 spells, and they added an item, but the problem is that both spells, one is pretty bad, and the other one just simply facilitates creating the item. And then you have, there's also another one, there's Wildspace Opre, and then some rules for smashing your ship up into enemies, and a few other things. I kind of mentally drifted on that. You got a fish suit, which is a fish suit, which is a space suit. You got 3 items actually. You got a space suit, a chair you sit on to control your ship, and you got a portable arcane device that automatically tracks the position and movement of all suns, planets, moons, and comets within the system, projecting the display all these bodies in the space above. So this Wildspace Opre is basically a tablet that projects everything in your area of space. So all the stuff basically just, it's nice that it's there. You could use it to build your own thing, but the problem is, and the artwork is fairly simple, and it gets the point across, but the more I look, it's one of those things where like, oh yeah, there's like a few items and a few spells. Well, it's nice that they included some items and spells, and then I look at them and like, yeah, at least they included a price for a Spelljammer helm in here, which is weird because they actually have a value, a monetary value for them. But anyways, it's one of those things that you think, like, you sit down and think, oh, there's some useful stuff in this book, and like you look at it and it's like, oh, it's just the bare minimum just to run the Spelljammer adventure. And you look at it, it's like, oh, it's just this, it's just that, and it's just the bare minimum. And then you got some broken abilities with some of the ancestries and some quirk characteristics. It's quite clear. This would have been so much better, but I'm gonna just like put a really sharp sword in it and say that this is clearly rushed to production. Like, Wizards of the Coast may have had like notes on a 5th edition Spelljammer, and then they heard about this one space fantasy game by a company, and all of a sudden like said, oh no, we really have to do something to counter that product. What do we have? We can go ahead and use Spelljammer to counter it. And we go ahead and rush out Spelljammer. We have the guy that go and gather up all the notes and assemble them into 3 books, and then make a very nice slipcase out of it. Throw in a Game Master screen or Dungeon Master screen, and then try to rush it out right around the time that the new space fantasy the new space game is going to appear on the market, and then it does not appear on the market, and then Wizard of the Coast kind of has this really subpar Spelljammer adventure or book. This is one of those cases where this feels like it's a little overpriced, even though if they took these 3, this is the really screwed up thing. Each one of these books is about as many pages as a small, on the small side, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition book. Let's take Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. How many pages does that have? It has over 250. It has 256 pages in Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. This book is bigger than all 3 of these books combined in pages. This is one of those weird situations where you have an illusion of value. This is a very important concept that people have to learn in this modern age, that sometimes due to the way stuff is packaged or binded together, you end up with an illusion that you are getting more, but in fact you are getting less. I grew up poor, and when I was a kid, I've always, like, when I went to go to like Walmart or Pick and Save or something like that, we would check the ounces of a can of SpaghettiOs or something like that, because when you go to Walmart or a Pick and Save, the cans are actually, they have different volumes inside them. I'm not joking. I'm going to go and I have this example right here. I can actually go get it. Wait in the video for me to go get the example. Okay, I happen to have some Campbell's chunky, spicy. You know, I love spicy food, like tons and tons. So I got cans here of Campbell's Chunky Spicy. See, however, if you to set them next to each other, you notice it's the same labeling and packaging, but you notice that the cans are different sizes. This is not unusual when you say like go to shop at Dollar General or Walmart or a Pick and Save. You will notice that the prices at a Pick and Save is a little bit more, or a Century or Kroger or something like that. So you say, oh, I can get it cheaper at Walmart, well, or Dollar General. Well, you go over to Dollar General and you buy a can. And then you look at the two cans. You get both cans, and you set them right next to each other, and you notice that the two cans are different sizes. And you look at the ounces, and this is the better option is actually grams. The one that you buy from Dollar General is 458 grams. While the one you buy at like a Piggly Wiggly or a Pick and Save is 533 grams. And weirdly enough, most of the time, they're almost the same price, except that you get a penny or a few pennies rounded off. So like you buy three of these from Dollar General for a discount, a slight discount. And it's like, if you think of the two cans, it's like, if I buy 3 of these from Dollar General, I get a better value. But when you take that into the factor of like the price difference in grams, you end up breaking even or losing money. This actually ends up being a better value sometimes. So you have to be, when it comes to stuff like this, sometimes you have to realize that all things are not fair and even. Sometimes when you buy, say, something like this, you end up with something of really good value. You open it up, there's tons and tons of information. There's aids and guides on how to build and construct things, or random tables galore for rapidly assembling towns and cities by population and such. And then you were to get like maybe like a case or something like that, a special case. And then when you open up the case or a sleeve, it's like a world construction kit. It's like 4 books together in a bundle. And you all of a sudden discover that you add all the pages up in the 3 or 4 books, and it's half the pages of one book that you could have bought. And it doesn't have nearly anywhere as many options as the book, but the case is $20 more. You feel really stupid. So this is one of those situations where with Wizards of the Coast where they got into a rush of pushing out product, and they magically discovered, due to falling sales, that people are not entirely stupid. This thing is a $39 book. Spelljammer, as it is, this Spelljammer case is $39 book in value. It's a $39 book in value that's sold at $70. Probably the one nice thing that's throwing the math is the inclusion of the screen. The 3 books together are probably something like $19 books. If you were to buy books about this size, each one of these books is probably a $9 to $19 book in value. So if it's $9 each, if these were soft covers, you got $28 worth here in bookies. And then you throw in the screen, which is like $19. You don't quite make out your value with the case. But since they're hardcovers and it looks nice, they get to charge you way more. And the sad thing is that I found after this came out, prices on the actual Spelljammer books from the Advanced Second Edition and etc. have inflated all the way up to hundreds of dollars in value. It's actually really hard to come across those books now. And from my experience talking to people that I've managed to come across that do run Spelljammer for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, a lot of them bought this book, and it's like these books, or book in split into 3, and like, oh shit, my players really wanted to play Spelljammer. I'm going to have to go and hunt down the old edition books to fill out all the missing details that Wizards of the Coast left out of this book, and that really inflated up the price of the Spelljammer books substantially. At some point in the future, they might come back down for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but they're right now ridiculous. Like, you were to go on Amazon for the old Advanced Edition Dungeons and Dragons books for Spelljammer, and they're sitting in that at, oh my god, $199, $250 shit territory. This thing now is perpetually cycling into like a cycle of constantly being on sale now. So Wizards of the Coast is having a hard time selling this set, while the Spelljammer books for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition sells constantly at a rapid pace. And the price is way up inflated. If each one of these books were separated out of the case and were sold for $19 or $24, they might be in that 3-star to 3.25-star range. The set combined together gets into this really weird, awkward space. The map for the Astral Adventures book actually fell out of the Astral Adventures book when I pulled it out and stayed in the case. But anyways, in the case of this, you end up having to buy the Astral Adventures Guide, Boo's Astral Menagerie, and the Light of Xaryxis, as well as the Game Master screen altogether as a bundle for $70. If this set is at $70, it's a 3-star. The Light of Xaryxis is really streamlined and is loaded with a lot of pretty artwork, but that artwork pads a lot of the pages up. And you don't get really much in the way of the story. A lot of game masters, even a lot of new ones, can actually write a better story in their sleep than the Light of Xaryxis. So that is actually probably like a 2.5-star adventure. Unless you are really in a hurry and you don't have a lot of time to come up with a basic framework, but you do have enough time to throw on some modifications, then you might actually be able to bump it up into a nicer adventure. Boo's Astral Menagerie is great for game masters, completely worthless for players. That book happens to be, for players, 0 stars. For game masters, it is 3.5 stars. Almost 3.5 stars. The problem with it is it's bundled in with everything else. Astral Adventurer's Guide. You have a nice selection of ancestries or races in it. The spells, magic items that are in it, and a lot of the rules are bare bone and only exist to basically keep the get you into space and doing space things, but really don't add a whole lot to it. A lot of stuff beyond the ancestries or races basically is just like stuff that I could come up with in my sleep. Or any decent game master could basically homebrew together way better or just as well in their sleep for the most part. The mechanics about ship damage is based around sizes, and it's basically you could just grab that out of the Dungeon Master's Guide as it is. It's just little simple pieces of advice sections on like, oh, you want to board a ship. Oh, this is a little bit of a basic framework of the concept of boarding a ship. If you want to board a ship, you most likely understand what boarding a ship is, and you really don't need them to remind you what a boarding a ship thing is. However, I guess considering a lot of factors in modern society, it's probably just a good idea to have it in there, as it would most likely remind people that the concept actually exists, and they can go with that. So the Astral Adventurer's Guide is like a 3-star. It kind of weirdly enough rounds itself out. It kind of conflicts with itself, because this is a thing that most of the value is towards the game master. The game master can pull out the Astral Adventurer's Guide and show it to the players, and it is in a way handy that there is 3 books. The problem is the 3 books are just bare minimums. It's the absolute minimum you can do to get the framework of Spelljammer in motion for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but it's not nearly enough to actually create a whole lot of depth or quality to it. A lot of the game masters are going to have to do a lot of the work past it, and a lot of cases, as I just said before, the situation has happened that a lot of people who want to run Spelljammer for 5th edition end up going and hunting down Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition books for Spelljammer, and they really have inflated that market and pricing now. So weirdly enough, the best thing about this book is it's just the framework that allows people to convert Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition Spelljammer books to 5th edition, and that's pretty much it. It just increased the reason to use 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons Spelljammer books for 5th edition. That's what it did. That's the thing it did. It was a countermeasure to the mysterious company that was going to release a space fantasy game, and it allowed people a platform to launch off back into Spelljammer and buy up all the old Advanced 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons Spelljammer books. There you go. That's it. That's all. If they cooked this better and filled out more of the mechanics, or added more spacey spells and space magic items and more options for space, they could have expanded out the Astral Adventures Guide. They could, if they took the creatures that they threw in on D&D Beyond and threw it into Boo's Menagerie, that would have added another 20 pages. It would have bumped this up to 84 pages, which is still really small for a book. A few more creatures, a few more variants, new alien monsters, and you could have got that up into the 100+ range and it'd been okay. Like, I think Volo's Guide is like the next smallest monster book. And that sits around 224 pages. So this is 224 pages. This book is discontinued from D&D Beyond. You cannot get this on D&D Beyond. By the way, that's another reason why you should never become super dependent on D&D Beyond. Is that besides the fact that Wizards of the Coast has a history of deleting such things, they also, as they go along, delete each books from existence on their platform. So there you go. I happen to have Volo's Guide on D&D Beyond because I bought it before they did that. Because I have a few people that really just can't play in person, and they are only play online people, and D&D Beyond facilitates that. But anyways, and then I get to the Light of Xaryxis, and it's just a basic framework of an adventure. So this clearly needed another year in building stuff into each one of these books, and they might have been decent books then, individually. But but it's just not great. It's a starting point. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful week, and a magnificent month. And see you next time. Ciao.